Tucker Carlson, who woke up extra early for us. How much do you miss us on the weekends, by the way, Tucker?
A lot, actually. I still wake up at 3 just to watch.
That's so nice of you. All right, well, off the top, I want to get your thoughts on this exclusive interview tonight that Sean Hannity did with Julian Assange. Flew over to London for this interview where Assange, we have a clip of this, basically saying he's 1,000% sure that this did not come from Russia, these WikiLeaks. Let's take a listen.
Can you say to the American people unequivocally that you did not get this information about the DNC, John Podesta's emails? Can you tell the American people 1,000% you did not get it from Russia or anybody associated with Russia?
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
So if it wasn't the Russian government and it wasn't a hack, it would have been a leak from probably somebody inside the DNC.
Well, we don't know is the point. I mean, Assange, and I haven't seen the whole interview, it airs tonight, but Assange in previous interviews, in the last interview he did, said he had not even been contacted by intelligence agencies or anybody looking into the story from the United States. Nobody's even asked him from the U.S. government, which is kind of remarkable since it was through, of course, WikiLeaks that this information became public. You have to ask yourself, if he's lying, what's the point of his lying? Julian Assange is a man of the left. He's not an ally of Donald Trump. He went on to say in his interview with Sean that he believes the purpose of all of this story is to delegitimize Trump. Why would he be acting on Trump's behalf? What is his motive for doing that? I don't see that he has one. We're missing part of the story. You've noticed, perhaps, that a number of journalists on the left, Andrew Coburn, for example, at Harper's, or Glenn Greenwald at The Intercept, have jumped up and said, wait a second, there's no evidence that Russia was behind this. Are they tools of the Kremlin, too? I mean, a lot of sober people who have no motive to lie are asking the obvious question, which is, do we really know that Putin was behind this? And the answer, I think, is we don't really know that.
Right. Tucker, you know, you're talking motives, which is exactly right. Who's doing what and why? How in Washington, in light of all of these competing motives, how do we get to the bottom of who it actually is? Is it going to be a congressional committee? Is it White House? Is it intelligence being finally released to the public? How do we get to a point where we've got certainty and not just speculation?
Well, that's a great question, and I think we need some level of certainty just because the stakes are so high. I mean, this story has delegitimized the election in the minds of many voters, and no matter whom you voted for, that's bad news. Catherine Herridge reported last night that sometime before President-elect Trump's inauguration on the 20th, we're apparently going to see a declassification of some of the evidence collected by the intelligence agencies that will, I guess, either prove or disprove this allegation that the Russian government was behind this. But I think that's necessary. That would be without a lot of precedent. They don't normally do that, but I think that we deserve, as voters, some backup here. The idea that we just sort of are assured by anonymous sources in the press that we know what happened and we all sort of nod, you know, of course we do. That's not really good enough for a story of this magnitude.
Yeah, well, we're going to hear a lot more tonight with that exclusive. The part one of this exclusive interview is airing tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Fox News channel, so make sure you tune into that. But we also want to get your thoughts. Nancy Pelosi now pleading with Republicans. She's saying, give Obamacare, give it a second look. Here's what she said, Tucker.
The fact is, it's the old thing of going into a china shop. You break it, you own it. And they're dealing with something that is very, when I say complex, it's sophisticated.
Tucker, it's so complex and so sophisticated, we need to protect it.
Yeah, actually, they broke it, and they own it. And on a party line vote, they passed it and are solely responsible for it. I mean, so what's the fear? That if Obamacare is repealed or changed, premiums will go up? People will lose their doctors? The middle class will find itself, you know, bearing an unsustainable burden? Right. I mean, that's already happened. So, I mean, this is insane. And you have to sort of wonder why in the 6 or 7 years since this passed, why has the president himself not conceded in public, look, my signature legislation hasn't worked as intended. Let's try and fix it. Sure. He hasn't. Vanity? I mean, I can't think of another explanation, but they should have, and they wouldn't be facing this problem right now if they had done that.
Nancy Pelosi was also very busy tweeting over the weekend, much like Donald Trump. She said Republicans will leave millions of Americans without health insurance and worsen the coverage of many more. My daughter, Mary, actually has Obamacare, and it's terrible. Right. She hates it.
Well, of course it's terrible, and it was written by lobbyists. I mean, that's the look. Young people ought to be able to buy a plan that suits them. We all should be able to, but because of the efforts of lobbyists, These mandates were packed in here, and they've enriched a lot of people in Washington, including my neighbors, I can promise you that. But that doesn't help the average person. I mean, why shouldn't I be able to choose a plan that suits my needs and those of my kids? But I'm not allowed to because of the influence of lobbyists on this bill.
Well, going beyond Nancy Pelosi, other Democrats, one Democrat on his way out is the president. President Obama is, we're not sure if he'll be fully out when he's out, but he's giving kind of farewell series of speeches. He did it with a video from the White House, and will be giving a speech on Tuesday in Chicago to sort of wrap his legacy. Some people are pointing to, obviously it's a natural home for Barack Obama, but Chicago's seen its share of problems, including the homicide rate in 2016, which unfortunately has skyrocketed. We had a guest on, well, you also got the murder rate, the shooting, 4,331 shootings. It's one of those
Donald
things.
Trump was tweeting about it yesterday.
Yeah. Saying if you need the help, you got to ask the federal government for it. And I spoke to Brunel Donald Che earlier this morning, Tucker. She's been a lifelong Democrat. She switched her vote this time, voted for Mr. Trump. She's from Chicago, and here's what she told me about that.
You made promises of hope and change with jobs and vocational programs that never came. And so people sat on life support, literally, waiting for a change, waiting for jobs, waiting for education. And so what happens with idle hands? It's the devil's workshop. Yeah. People, instead of going to work, putting on their suit and ties and uniforms, they're going to pick up guns to feed their families, sell drugs to feed their families. And what I think that President Obama should do is he should get behind the president-elect like never before, help the president-elect do what he couldn't do, which is help our inner cities.
I mean, 8 years later, the president goes home to his city, and it is a sad, sad situation.
Well, it is. And it's a great city in a lot of ways. It's a great city if you're rich, for sure. It's a nice place to live. But it's a deeply troubled city. The murder rate, as you said, 56% rise over last year. There's something really wrong. But it's also a very badly run city. Chicago has almost a $70 billion unfunded pension liability for a city. That's not the state of Illinois. That's just the city of Chicago. That's totally unsustainable. And it's the fruits, of course, of bad management for decades. Now, Obama hasn't run Chicago, but people who funded his campaign, who began his political career, with whom he agrees on almost every issue, have. And nobody ever notes that. I mean, if you take the ideas of the modern Democratic Party and apply them to a city, you wind up with a place like Chicago. And no one ever answers for that.
It's a microcosm. You're exactly right. With the unfunded liabilities at the federal level, the debt at the federal level, the support of the Black Lives Matter movement, it's all reflected in Chicago.
Wouldn't this be a bigger story in the mainstream legacy press, Tucker, if this were a Republican-led city?
Well, of course it would. And by the way, it would be fair. I mean, if you had a city that was kind of a test case for your ideas, a sort of, biosphere 2, where you took all your theories and applied them to people and waited 50 years, I think it'd be fair to say this is a referendum on your ideas. And if you wound up with a place like Chicago or Detroit or Cleveland or Toledo, a lot of these, and there are other factors, of course, but liberal ideas, governing ideas are part of it, and they all failed, then I think it would be fair to say, well, maybe you should reassess your ideas, wouldn't it?
No,
I think it would be.
That's a great point. Tucker, good to see you this morning. Also, you are doing so great at night. We're loving watching you.
Well, thank you, Abby.
Happy New Year.
Great to see you.
Yeah, what a show we have had today. Thank you very much for joining us live from New York City. Now let's go down to our nation's capital. Laura Ingraham joins us. And Laura, we're going to talk in a moment about Julian Assange and the exclusive in-person one-on-one interview that Sean Hannity is going to run tonight. But Donald Trump in the last half hour has sent out 3 tweets. First one up. He tweeted 30 minutes ago, General Motors is sending Mexican-made model of Chevy Cruze to U.S. car dealers tax-free across the border. Make in USA or pay big border tax. All right, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think Team Trump is examining the options here for companies who have been pulling this type of trick now for some time, and look for this to be a theme that they hit in the 18, 17 days until the inauguration and then after that. So I think when people hear these stories about American companies going abroad and then getting that type of tax-free treatment coming back into the country with the product that they make overseas, it roils people on the inside. I think that people understand that we need good-paying manufacturing jobs in this country. We need to create an environment, which I think the Trump team is working on doing with tax reform, corporate tax reform, and other incentives for these companies to stay here. Of course, there's going to be regulation, but not the type of choking regulation that is really hampering business development, business creation, and businesses thriving in this country. It's a winner issue across party lines, so I'm not surprised that they're hitting it today. Well, speaking of regulations that choke industry, he's also tweeting this morning about Obamacare. Two tweets in a row, actually. The first is President-elect tweeting, "People must remember that Obamacare just doesn't work, and it's not affordable." 116% increases in Arizona. Bill Clinton called it crazy. And then in a second tweet, he's talking about the Democratic governor of my home state of Minnesota, Mark Dayton, saying, who said famously, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, is no longer affordable, and it is lousy health care. Now, these tweets coming as Congress maybe it is looking at changes or tweaks to Obamacare. Even Nancy Pelosi hinting that, hoping Republicans don't change it. Here's what Nancy Pelosi has said about Republicans not changing Obamacare, and then we want to get your thoughts on all of that.
The fact is, it's the old thing of going into a china shop. You break it, you own it. And they're dealing with something that is very, when I say complex, it's sophisticated.
The author of Obamacare saying, you break it, you own it.
I'm trying to even diagram that sentence on the graphic. I mean, that's quite a presentation of subject, verb, direct object. Nancy Pelosi knows that this thing is going down. I mean, in the last gasp of the Obama presidency, what they're trying to do, to project forward, what they're trying to do is poison any effort to wholesale repeal it, which is going to be difficult, and it is going to take time, and then replace it. And what the Democrats will do, and that was inartfully worded by her, but what the Democrats will do is they'll say, look at all these people who got coverage. It's not perfect, but we can fix it. They want to burn it all down and then build it back up, which is just not going to happen. And I think Trump very smartly today with these tweets was trying to preempt what the Democrats will do once they hit the gavel again and are back in session. And a lot of folks make fun of the tweets and, oh, he shouldn't be tweeting. I think on this stuff, it's like a Reddit top line. You don't need Reddit when you have these tweets, because Trump says, no, 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 no. People have experienced these obscene out-of-pocket costs, huge premium increases, doctors retiring, and these little bullet points are just little triggers and reminders for people about what's happened when the government shoved through, the Obama government shoved through Obamacare with virtually no Republican support. It really, speaking of going into a china shop, I used that analogy if I were Nancy Pelosi, because there wasn't a piece of china left on the wall after they got through with their so-called health care reform. Yeah.
All right, so I want to get your thoughts on this as well. An exclusive tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on the Fox News Channel. Sean Hannity flew over to London, sat down with Julian Assange, asking him about the WikiLeaks, the big question, where they ultimately came from. Here's how he responded.
Can you say to the American people unequivocally that you did not get this information about the DNC, John Podesta's emails? Can you tell the American people 1,000% you did not get it from Russia or anybody associated with Russia?
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
Well, Nora, this comes just a few days after President Obama gives Russia essentially a slap on the wrist for what he calls involvement in our elections. What is going on here?
Well, I think we have to be taking what Julian Assange with a grain of salt. I neither have the Julian Assange as the First Amendment trailblazer view of him, or that he's only a creepy, paranoid narcissist. I think those are the two polar views of Julian Assange. He's probably somewhere in the middle. I would say that you don't have to get the information from the Russian government to have a connection to the Russian government. We know that Putin does have hackers who are loosely connected to other groups who are connected to the Russian government. Now, I'm not saying that we know this is Russia that did this. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But when he says, well, I didn't get it directly from the Russian, you think Vladimir Putin is stupid enough to get, okay, here's what we want you to do, Julian. We have this information. We're going to give it to you. So if Russia was really involved in this, they wouldn't deliver it to someone like Assange directly. It would go through webs and channels of other hacking cohorts, and then it would maybe, it would get to them that way. But so I think you have to really listen carefully to what he's saying and what he's not saying in that. So again, I'm not on the First Amendment trailblazer side of this or the creepy narcissist accused rapist side of it. We have to look at this with a grain of salt. I think Republicans should take this soberly, carefully, but also understand that Obama has a political reason for, I think this is where Assange is right, trying to delegitimize Trump's first 100 days.
Yeah, that's well said.
Well, if the actual leaker were to come forward and say, okay, fine, I'm going to tell you, I'm the person who did it, that would settle all that. Meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about this. Donna Brazile, the debate cheater during the Democrat town halls and whatnot, you know, she has said some incredibly pejorative things about Donald Trump, and yet she wants a seat at the table for Democrats in the first 100 days and beyond. We want you to listen to this montage and then put into perspective what she's asking for now. Listen to this.
I denounce Donald Trump for not denouncing the kind of vitriol, the kind of violence that he has perpetrated with his angry rhetoric.
Since I play straight up, and I'll play straight up with you, I did not receive any questions from CNN.
No, boo-boo. And next time, don't bring me no emails unless you have cleaned your system, okay? Don't bring nothing corrupting to me.
Given that all you've said about this hack, do you think Donald Trump's win was legitimate?
Donald Trump used this information in ways to also sow division. I was very disappointed, and his repeated usage of some of the stolen information, he used it as if he received daily talking points.
So is the election legit?
The election was tainted by this intrusion.
So, Laura, based on her background and the fact that she leads an inherently partisan organization by default, wanting a seat at the table, is there any way that's meant to be constructive?
Well, that's how Republicans felt about 8 years ago when Barack Obama came in and said, you know, we're going to do the stimulus and son of stimulus and Obamacare, and we're going to ram it through because, remember, Nancy Pelosi had a gavel and she was going to use it. And they thought the gavel was going to hit the Republicans, and they hit so hard that it never come back. Well, now,
huge gavel.
Wow, 8 years later, suddenly, oh, we want a seat at the table. I think one thing that we do know is that on some issues, Trump, I hope, will work with Democrats, and one of them is going to be trade. The news coming out this morning, Wall Street Journal, that Bob Lighthizer will be named as the U.S. Trade Representative, which is a phenomenal pick. Lighthizer was the deputy USTR for Reagan at a very young age.
Tough guy.
Brilliant lawyer at Skadden Arps, led the trade team there. I used to work at Skadden. I know Bob well. Phenomenal pick. Now, on trade, some of the Democrats will be able to work with Donald Trump. But for Democrats to stick out their chests and say, look, you've got to give us this voice, they didn't give Republicans a voice. And in fact, Obama looked down upon the Republicans. Remember that sniffing thing he did with Paul Ryan sitting in the front row 8 or 7 years ago? So it's always whose ox is gored in these circumstances.
Well,
poor Donna.
We had Judge Napolitano on earlier this morning, and he reminded us of something that could happen today, a loophole. What is it, a split second at noon?
That's right. However, the judge never worked at the Supreme Court, but you did. So at noon today, when the Senate technically is out of session for just a couple of seconds, do you think Barack Obama will make a recess appointment of Merrick Garland? Because that's a suggestion on the crazy, on some of the interwebs.
Yeah, well, President Obama is going to click his heels 3 times, and he will go home again to this land of make-believe. As cynical and as political, I think, as and pejorative and petulant as President Obama in many ways has been over the past several weeks, I don't even think he is capable of doing this. It would be so far out of the norm. It would not be upheld in the federal courts. I would highly doubt that he would do this. This is one of those fun fantasies being bandied about on the web and keeping legal analysts in business, I guess, but it's not going to happen.
Well, we have heard from Mr. Trump. He wants to appoint someone even before the inauguration on January 20th. Do you think that's going to happen?
I think that would be smart. Well, why not? I mean, he already has the list out. It'll be someone from that initial list that he released, people like Steve Colleton, Allison Ide, a lot of great people on that list. I don't think there's any harm in it.
But, Laura, real quick, any big predictions here in the first couple of days of the Trump presidency that you're hearing about in Washington?
I think what you're going to see is swift action on in news about building the wall. on corporate tax reform, on tax simplification, and probably in the first 30 days, infrastructure, which will work with some of the Democrats on. The question Republicans are going to be asking is how are we going to pay for all this, and can we afford to do this without the booming economic growth that a lot of people think is going to come about as a result of these policies.
Quickly,
But I
think Rex Tillerson will get through?
I do. I think Tillerson's going to get through. He was the choice of Condoleezza Rice and James Baker, so a lot of conservatives saying, we like Tillerson, but what does that mean? Are the Bush is back again in foreign policy? We'll see.
All right. Look at the time. Laura, you got to go do your radio show and go edit Life Z.